So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Benjamin Burrows. I work as a CPN in the Black Country Liaison and Diversion Outreach team. I've been working as a qualified mental health nurse now for just over 3 years. 10th of September is World Suicide Prevention Day, and I've been asked to share my experiences of how suicide has affected my life. Hopefully this can give you some insight into the devastating effects that it's had on the people around them and why it's so important that we do our best to prevent any suicides. So this is my story, and some of you might find it a bit of upsetting. Back in January 2014, I started my first year of mental health training at the University of Wolverhampton. I remember being so happy at that time that all of my hard work and going through the stress of the application had been worth it. My youngest brother was 22 years old at this point. He'd been struggling with his mental health. He was hospitalised in December 2013 as he felt like taking his own life. He had a CPN who worked with him after his discharge from hospital, and as you can imagine, I hoped to use some of my skills I was about to learn to also help him. Although his behaviour could be quite bizarre at times, he was seeing a psychiatrist on a regular basis and was prescribed some medication. In December 2014, he had some blips, and both me, my mum and my other brother got in touch with him and encouraged him to contact the crisis team to get him the help that he needed. On the night of 20th December 2014, he retired to bed and reassured my mum that he was feeling alright. He asked if she would cut his hair the next day. She was more than happy to agree to this and wasn't concerned for his mental health at this point. The same day, me and my partner were on our way to a short Christmas break in Bruges. The next day, we were walking through Bruges, and that's when we received the call. My brother was dead. He'd hung himself in his bedroom, and my mum and brother had found his body that morning. From that moment, I knew that me and my family's life would change forever. At 23 years old, my youngest brother had taken his own life, and there was nothing we could do about it. It was final, and now we had to deal with it. Me and my partner rushed home. In shock, we paid well over the odds to get back home as soon as possible. My Italian nan, 74 years old at that time, was hysterically upset. She'd go through waves of acceptance before stereotypically banging doors and wailing a painful cry in total disbelief. She has high blood pressure, and I was convinced at the time that the shock would kill her. I lay in bed in a spare room in disbelief, forcing myself to sleep and occasionally being awoken by her cries. My mum and brother were in shock. I had never seen my mum looking so unwell. She was pale, quiet, and her legs were shaking. My brother told me that she would often cry herself to sleep every night. She had months off work. My other brother was withdrawn for months. He spent a lot of time in his room, isolating, and it took him years to get well enough to work again. The family was already going through a rough time. My dad had suffered a major stroke that year. He had to be told at his hospital bedside that his son had passed away. We weren't sure if he would be able to understand at first, but he did, and he sobbed surrounded by doctors and nurses in case the shock had killed him. My brother's family and friends were devastated. For many of his young friends from school and colleagues, this was the first time he had to deal with death. It was someone the same age as them. I think it must have had a profound effect on them. I tried to reassure them as much as possible at the funeral. For me, I was determined to continue and complete my mental health nurse training. I had counselling to help me with the guilt of what happened. He was my brother, and I felt responsible for him. I was out of the country when it happened, and there was this forever circle of what ifs, and going over the situation of what I could have done differently. After what happened, I also had suicidal thoughts at times myself, but I knew I could never express or act on these no matter how bad I felt because of the devastation I saw it had caused. Because of this, I asked my GP to put on antidepressants. I'd muddled through university, supported by my tutor Alison Geeson, and still managed to get a first class honours degree. 4 different antidepressants, and 5 years later, into my second nursing post, I came off the antidepressants and entered the stage of my life I now consider recovery. In my job, I frequently come across service users who've lost hope or failed to see a future for themselves. It's difficult, but I draw on my experience to give the pep talk that a lot of people unfortunately don't have anyone to do this for them, and of course arrange the help that they need. I would ask that all my colleagues who come across any service users who've expressed suicidal thoughts, or who they suspect to have these thoughts, to ask the right questions and spend the time to speak to them and get the help that they need. Our services aren't perfect, but please remember that we're all human.